SRC of the Madurai branch, many distinguished members of the profession, friends, I wish you all a good morning. And I'm very excited to be here at the inauguration of this two-day national workshop, which is part of the continuing education program under the aegis of the Professional Development Committee of ICAI. I have a relatively unique relationship with the ICAI, considering I'm a non-member. Of course, all of you are intimately involved, but as a non-member, I think almost every year from the year 2013 till now, I've attended at least one event, if not more events every year, and spoken at least once a year. My inaugural address, or the first introduction to the ICAI, I delivered the S. Vaidhyanatha Iyer Memorial Lecture in 2013 on the role of efficient capital markets in growth and development. I didn't realize that there were two Iyer Memorial Lectures in SIRC. One is the S. Vaidhyanatha Iyer Memorial Lecture, the other is the V. Shankara Iyer Memorial Lecture, who is the father of Mani Shankara Iyer. And it was my privilege 9 years later in 2022 at the invitation of Mani Shankara Iyer that I also delivered the V. Shankara Iyer Memorial Lecture at the SIRC in the same hall on the future of cooperative federalism. In 2013, I was a managing director at Standard Chartered Bank. In 2022, I was then Minister for Finance and Human Resources, Government of Tamil Nadu. I got a bit famous, I think, in the 2014 annual SIRC conference that was held in Mahabalipuram. And somebody asked me the question, what is going to happen to the price of oil, crude oil? Because already dropped from 130 to about 80 or 85. And I said, why do you assume that the range is only 80, 85 to 130? It could drop a lot further. And oil proceeded to continue to drop over the next 2 years, down to $30 or something a barrel. So I got famous for a prediction, and then I've been called back ever since to all the ICAI events. But anyway, I wanted to talk a little bit, though I am not even close to being qualified as an accountant. I was actually, during my MBA studies, I did very well in the courses related to accounting. One was called Financial Statement Analysis and one was called something else, I forget. Got A+ in both, and I would say a significant part of my career in banking was enhanced by my ability to understand and relate to the nuances of accounting, particularly in the age of securitization, derivatization, globalization, and the arbitrage between accounting standards between IASB, FASB, and the different accounting protocols in China, in other parts of the world. During the age of pre-GFC, if you will, hundreds of billions of dollars traded on the accounting treatment differences between what should be on balance sheet, off balance sheet, what would be considered only owned proportionally or consolidatable into the balance sheets of banks and financial institutions. Anyway, as somebody with that experience, when we came to government, we had a big reform agenda. I would say that I'm extremely proud and satisfied with the track record of my 2 years as finance minister and 3 budgets. We made such huge progress, never before seen, to my knowledge, in any state or in the union's finances. In 2 years, we brought the revenue deficit down from 3.61% to 1.23%. We brought the fiscal deficit down from 5.21% to 3%. We simultaneously increased spending by almost 1 lakh crores over 2 years. The Union Finance Minister was kind enough to release a lot of GST compensation dues, and we were able to find some of the limitations of the cash accounting model we follow, where monies that had been accounted as spent in previous budgets actually were parked in what they call public deposit accounts, and we were able to accelerate spending. And the great benefit of all of that was that because of this accelerated spending of items that were parked from previous years and not included in this year's budget, despite our cutting our deficit so badly or so aggressively, we didn't see any slowdown in growth, because that's always the risk. If you cut government spending dramatically, you will see slowdown in growth. But as the 2 years we were there, both years Tamil Nadu grew between 1.5% and 2.5% faster than the national average. And both years we had inflation levels between 1% and 2% lower than the national average. So in some sense, it was a perfect outcome. Lower inflation, higher growth, lower deficit, higher spending. And I'm extremely grateful to my Chief Minister for those 2 years. But these are results, right? You don't get new results or different results by doing the same things that you used to do before. So in fact, what this really speaks to is the hundreds and hundreds of reforms that we did. In fact, more reforms, as my former finance secretary said, that there was an argument when we talked about the pace of reforms. And my finance secretary and my additional secretary had a difference of opinion. My finance secretary said, sir, we have done more reforms in the 2 years than in the 50 years of this department. And my additional secretary says, no, I can't validate that. I can only say that we have done more than the 30 years that we have all been in service. Who knows what happened 30 years before that. So in any event, we did more reform in 2 years than at least 30 years, maybe 50 years. I want to focus in particular on a set of reforms that I think is very relevant to your profession. Very early, I decided that improving the audit mechanisms within the government were key to my ability to deliver better results. So, to my knowledge, at least the first time in India of any state, we legislated a new post called Director General of Audit for the government of Tamil Nadu. We got an officer on deputation from the IAAS, the former Accountant General A&E of Tamil Nadu. We took on deputation, appointed him the first Director General of Audit, and started carving out what I would say are the 3 professions, or 3 qualifications, in my opinion, 3 pillars of the audit practice, and in your case, your profession. To me, the first is independence. You call it arm's length, you call it absence of conflict of interest. But an auditor should be able to look at things without any bias, without fear, without favor, without any kind of inside relationship. That was not happening. In a lot of places in the government, the audit department was part of the function itself, and people would rotate in and out of functional jobs to audit jobs. And effectively, there was no use of having an audit. Today, you'd be an officer, the audit would have some complaint about you. Tomorrow, you'd go sit as the audit manager, remove the complaint yourself. Day after, you'll go back to the field and then create a new problem. So we had to break all this. So for the first time, we said nobody can audit themselves. No secretary or senior of the departments or no ministry could have its own auditors inside its own department. All of them had to be put under the Director General of Audit and had to be given independence. Now, I've seen this play out in many, many cases in many, many parts of the world. As you know, I used to be an international banker. So I can't emphasize this enough. The core, the basic building block of being an auditor is independence, absence of conflict of interest, truly arm's length with no other relationship. I would say we still have a bit of work to go, but relative to what I found, we did a tremendous amount of delinking or removal of conflict of interest in the government of Tamil Nadu. The second is professional skill and attention to detail, computerization, access to records, as well as actually understanding the nature of rules, accounting procedures, policies, and ability to apply them professionally. In the government of Tamil Nadu, sadly, and this is not unique to audit, but it was most profoundly felt in audit. Sadly, the way the recruiting model works, there are very few direct professional recruiting channels. So the bulk of the people in audit, whether you consider that milk audit, cooperative audit, local fund audit, state fund audit, HR&CE audit, the bulk of the people in audit had come through the regular recruiting, Group 4, kind of office assistant, junior assistant, typist recruiting, and had just worked their way up through seniority to be auditors. Now, to me, those are not adequate qualifications to be an auditor. Right? There's actual professional skill required and certain attributes and education required. So, though we couldn't change the system overnight, we partnered up with ICAI, and we have been running rigorous training programs for the existing people because I cannot change them immediately. And it was my vision, which I hope the new finance minister will implement, that going forward we should have a separate recruiting stream of professionals for the audit department rather than simply take people who had come in through a generic recruiting and try to make them auditors. There is a separate set of skills and kind of knowledge required, in my opinion, to be a good auditor, and that was not being kind of implemented, at least through any formal process. We have started that process. We need to do a lot more. The third thing I would say is that this is, like many professions, a fluid kind of profession. The rules are changing all the time. The laws are changing all the time. In particular, the accounting standards are changing all the time. Financial innovation drives a lot of requirement for rule change. But also legislation like GST drives a lot of change. And so it is a profession where continuous learning, continuing education, and keeping yourself up to speed with the latest developments is vital. In that vein, of course, I'm very glad that the Institute does things like these national workshops that we're in today, that you have a continuing education credit model, that you have to take a certain minimum number of credits, which I think all good professions have. But again, we try to implement that to some extent in the government. And again, with the help of ICAI, we started, I think, for the first time in Tamil Nadu, after 5 years of the implementation of GST, we started, training programs on GST, how it works, how it's supposed to work, how things should be done, and so forth. I would say that it is a work in progress at best, right? The sad part of our democracy is that constitution envisioned by the founding fathers and the Constituent Assembly under the able leadership of Dr. Ambedkar, in its implementation today, leaves a lot to be desired. Some of that is through neglect, some of that is through subsequent legislation like the Anti-Defection Bill. Some of that is through new legislation that is not quite fleshed out enough or operationalized in a professional way or a very granular way, GST being a very good example. But for all those reasons, I think your profession, your institute, your association is vital as we try to not just formalize and grow our economy, but also as we stabilize our democracy and we run the governance in a way that is transparent and gives confidence to the citizens that the government is being run professionally and transparently. I will just close with one word on the GST Council. I was appointed a minister in May of 2021, partly because of COVID and travel restrictions, partly because I was still trying to learn my role properly and I had never been a minister before, partly because I'd been given many portfolios: finance, pensions, personnel, administrative reforms, planning, development, many portfolios. I was so busy I didn't get a chance to go to Delhi. First time I went to Delhi after becoming minister was December 30th, 2021. So more than 7 months after I had been appointed minister. And I went to attend a meeting of the finance ministers of the states along with the union finance minister. And then after that, an emergency council of the GST. I had attended a couple virtually, but I think that was the first physical one. And what I want to say is that over a year and a half, 2 years of subsequent meetings in Delhi, the point that CA Prasanna Kumar made has really struck home to me, that Politics is politics. People from many parties, from many different states of different economic contexts come to the GST Council or come to the Finance Minister's meetings. But I was so happy to find that at the meetings themselves, there was very little politics. There was increasing professionalism, and issues that I had pointed out as a first-time member on a virtual meeting, let's say in June of 2021, which up till then had neither been explicitly spoken or only spoken about by people from the southern states, from the non-governing party of the union. By the time we looked at the last GST meeting held in Delhi in February of this year, there was no daylight between the positions taken by Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Bihar, Punjab, Andhra. I mean, you look north, south, east, west, BJP, DMK, AAP, all of us had come around to one particular view on the notion of GST tribunals. In that sense, it is very heartening that professionalism, that the right values, the right design, the right notion of democracy is beyond politics. It's beyond whether you're a rich state or a not rich state. It's beyond whether you're a southern state or a northern state. If something is the right thing to do, then everybody agrees it's the right thing to do, irrespective of all these other variables. And that, to me, is a great sign of the health of our democracy, at least as far as the GST Council is concerned. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised. And I must say that during my tenure in this role that was of relative national prominence, and not just my state job, that may be one of the fondest memories that I will take from my time there. I'll say one last word that this new portfolio, information technology and digital services, is an enormous portfolio, right? I'm a bit daunted actually. To do things that I was doing was administration. If you knew what was right and what was wrong, you just went ahead and did it. Somebody else had to go and do all the implementation. You just allocated appropriately and went on. My department now is the exact opposite. We are the ones that have to maintain the data centers, that have to keep all the interfaces, all the websites, all the platforms, all the applications, all the software, all the hardware. It is a huge, huge responsibility. All the LCOT parks, all the SEZs, all the e-governance platforms, the cable TV, RSA cable TV, the fiber networks, the state fiber networks, BharatNet. It is just an enormous portfolio. And my worry, as I said when I had my review meeting, is that if everything goes right, nobody knows you exist because it functions very smoothly. And if something goes wrong, everything is your problem, right? If the data center is hacked, or if the network fails, or if some old defunct PC is not running the proper antivirus. So it is a portfolio with enormous responsibility, huge scope, huge potential because of the economic circumstances we find ourselves in globally, as well as our profound strengths as a state in terms of an educated workforce and good infrastructure and good connectivity. But there's also a massive component of governance, of standardization, of risk management, of, platform strengthening, of risk isolation, right? Like in large corporates, we have all these rules for what happens if your network were to become compromised, how you firewall and segregate different things so that you don't all go down at the same time. I'm not clear how far these things have been implemented. So it's a lot of work. As the ex officio member said, I'm sure that as I progress, I will look for help from many professional organizations, but given my relationship with ICAI and given the working relationship we had in my old responsibility, which is ongoing, you must, of course, be rest assured that I will reach out to you when the time comes. Anyway, I apologize, I'm running a bit late, but I thank you again for the opportunity. I wish you all a wonderful couple of days I see the topics. I'm sure they'll all be tremendously enlightening. And, continuing education and keeping your skills relevant is by far the most important responsibility of advanced professionals like you. So I'm once more appreciative of the Madurai branch and of the SIRC and of the ICAI's professional development activities. And I wish you all a wonderful 2 days. Thank you.